Hello everybody, today we're going to be starting a new storytime video. So as you can see, I'm playing as the Icy Crown with the glowy skin that turns on and off every few moments. We're also, I figured out how to start the weather so I can make it all nice and rainy and everything like that. I won't tell you the command for it, but it is pretty fun. But if it changes weather, don't worry about that. We're not going to be doing any gameplay right now. It is a little choppy, though. I wonder why it's doing that right now. See what I mean? Like I said, this is a work in progress. This is not the finished thing for The Wings of Dawn. But yeah, so we're going to be reading an SCP today, the Unwilling Dimensional Hopper, also known as SCP-507, one of my favorites. My second favorite, actually. The first I've already read. And Ginger Panda, who is my friend who asked for the first ever storytime video. I'm going to be reading her favorite cryptid. So we're going to start with the Squonk. And if you know what the Squonk is, you could tell it's actually not that much to go off of, unfortunately. But that's okay. We're going to be reading the little Wikipedia article on it because I don't know that much about it, unfortunately. But that's okay. We'll be fine. We'll be fine, guys. So, with the Squonk. The Squonk is a mythical creature that is reputed to live in the hemlock forests of northern Pennsylvania in the United States. Johnstown, Pennsylvania celebrates the Squonk at the Squonkapalooza in August. Origins. The first written account of the Squonk was from the 1910 book Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods. His prevalence was attested in the next written iteration in the 1939 book Fearsome Creatures. Fearsome Critters. This book suggested that the creatures had migrated from deserts to swamps to finally settle in Pennsylvania. As logging camps were continuously moving in the early 20th century, this could explain their migration to Pennsylvania. Appearance and behavior. Unlike many mythological creatures, the supposed physical characteristics of the Squonk remain unchanged from the original written account, which states the Squonk is of a very retiring disposition, generally traveling about at dusk and twilight. Because of its misfitting skin, which is covered with warts and moles, it is always unhappy. Hunters who are good at tracking are able to follow a Squonk by its tear-stained trail, for the animal weeps constantly. When cornered, an escape seems impossible, or when surprised and frightened, it may even dissolve itself in tears. William T. Cox, The Squonk, Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods, 1910. Later retellings included the Squonks were slowest on moonlit nights as they tried to avoid seeing their ugly appearance in any illuminated bodies of water. In addition to warts and moles, the creatures were given webbed toes on their left feet. The given species, quote-unquote, taxonomy of this creature, Lacrimacorpus dissolvens, is made up of the Latin tear, body, and dissolve. These refer to its supposed ability to dissolve when captured. In scientific literature, some substances are stable in solution or some other wild form, but cannot be isolated or captured without actually catalyzing their own polymerization or decomposition, dissolving in their own tears. For example, a molecule containing the carboxylic acid iode. Anyway, and an acid labile iode might be stable when initially prepared as the salt, e.g. barium prephenate, but unstable as the free acid prephenate acid. These have been named chemical squonks. So squonks are a real thing, just not the cryptid. Anyway, usage in popular media. Any major dude will tell you is a song written by Donald Fagen and Walter Becker that was first released by Steely Dan on their 1974 album Pretzel Logic, and has the line, "Have you ever seen a Squonks tears? Well, look at mine." The progressive rock band Genesis has a song written by bassist Mike Rutherford about this creature, simply named Squonk, on their 1976 album A Trick of the Tail. And it says the references here. Sorry, I butchered all those names in scientific words. As you could tell, I don't know that much about chemical solutions. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be moving on to SCP-507, or as everyone knows it, the Unwilling Dimensional Hopper. Item number SCP-507. Object Class Safe. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-507 is allowed to free roam of the facility, obviously bearing anything that would breach security or safety protocols. Anytime SCP-507 leaves its private quarters, it must be accompanied by an agent, mostly at this point to make sure it does not shift without the facility's knowledge. 507 should not be physically touched if there have been more than 2 weeks since its last shift. The risks inherent in disobeying this protocol make the action its own punishment, should the issue of dissolute. You see, this is why I have such trouble reading these things. It doesn't make any sense. Disciplinary measures ever come up. When SCP-507 undergoes a shift, faculty will be informed to keep an eye out for its eventual reappearance. It also has a tracking device implanted into it, and a daily signal check should verify whether or not 507 has returned from its trip. If it reappears in or nearby the facility, 507 will return to its quarters on its own. Otherwise, a retrieval team of 3 plainclothes agents may be sent to provide transportation back. Upon successful return, 507 can be the subject of various physical tests up until 2 weeks after each shift. It is worth noting that 507 is allowed a computer with an internet connection via a proxy, which strictly limits what information can be uploaded into where in its room, and may petition to use/meet with/act as a test subject for safe or Euclid SCPs that do not affect mental functions negatively or carry an infectious trait. This is a result of SCP-507's persistently clean record, and the implication that if 507 was ever going to be a security leak, it would have used its faux teleportation powers to do so already. It is also worth considering that 507 is actually below average in most physical traits, and that in even worst case scenarios, any SCP agent should be more than capable of carrying out a termination order. And that's messed up. This guy can't stop teleporting. SCP-507 is a Caucasian male with blonde hair and green eyes, sporting no other outstanding characteristics besides being somewhat overweight and speaking with a vague accent of disputable origin. Although 507 has an already established name due to its unremarkable upbringing, it seems to find entertainment in forcing those it meets to give it a nickname in lieu of divulging this information. Thus, 507 will now respond to the names of Tommy, Steve, Bruto, Guy, Houdini, and Grabnock the Destroyer. This guy's having fun with it. SCP-507 was originally recovered from the blank asylum, when standard surveillance following repeated successful escape attempts brought its abilities to light. All records of this incident were confiscated, and 507 was taken into custody under the pretense of moving it to a more secure facility. The original theory was that 507 possessed some sort of teleportation ability, as it would suddenly disappear and eventually reappear in a different location. Subsequent interviews with the subject did verify that its ability could be used in such a manner, but it was merely a side effect for its main affliction. 507 holds that during its periods of disappearance, it is actually displaced into a random alternate reality. The landscape generally stays the same, but the inhabitants and climate of the parallel world often do not. SCP-507 also insists that it has no control over the time and duration of these shifts. This has been more or less been confirmed by the subject being known to displace at inconvenient times, such as mid-sentence, while sleeping, or while using on-site public facilities. If SCP-507 moves about in the alternate world, the eventual shift back will then place it at the corresponding area in our reality. A sample list of 507's descriptions of alternate realities can be found in document 507-00. Mentally, 507 shows no large deviations from the psychological profile for a normal person. It has confessed to have always had a great interest in the paranormal and mythological, which has directly led to its eventual permission to interact with relatively harmless SCPs. 507 especially enjoys meeting with other sentient SCPs, once going so far as to request a small vacation to visit SCP-082. The request was eventually granted after persistent pleading from 507, and the meeting was thankfully uneventful. Document 507-00. A sample list of 507's supposed extra-dimensional travels, along with any demands made by it after returning. Let me take a quick drink of water. This is also your point in the video to stop what you're doing, take your water in, eat some snacks, take your medicine, do whatever you need to do. In fact, pause this if you so deem. So deem it so. Here we go. Subject arrived in complete darkness, leading it to assume that the current location was indoors or subterranean. After fumbling about for a possible way out, subject heard a sound akin to muted breathing nearby. Subject then decided to curl up in the nearest corner and wait it out instead of risking a blind confrontation with an unknown creature. Request a standard flashlight, which it now always carries on its person. Subject appeared in a replica of the facility, although apparently fallen into disuse. Further exploration led to the discovery of various corpses strewn about the area, all heavily decayed and covered in an odd type of mold. Upon noting that the corpses seemed to rhythmically expand and contract as if still breathing, subject attempted to leave the facility. The idea was quickly discarded when it opened an exit and found that the outside world was apparently coated with the same odd growth. Quest: heavy doses of voriconazole, and a fungal expert to help ascertain the nature of the mold. No exact match of the described mold was found, but it was noted to share many attributes with a certain type of cordyceps fungi. See Addendum 507-02. Upon reappearing, subject was reported to mutter, "So many spiders." Subject refused to elaborate. Request: a handheld firearm of any type. Request was granted under the stipulation that said firearm is specifically built to use only rubber bullets. Subject once again appeared in a pitch-black location with breathing nearby. Upon turning on his flashlight, subject was surprised by a man wearing a black business suit and sunglasses with an impossibly wide smile. Said smiling man was apparently leaning in towards SCP-507 when it turned on the light, the end result being that their faces were almost touching. Smiling man then remarked, "Back so soon?" before subject switched the light off again, discharged all the rounds in his firearm at the general vicinity of the man, and once more curled up in the nearest corner until shifted back into our reality. Request: none noted. Those with level 2 security clearance may read a full list by accessing document 507-3B. Those with level 2 507 security clearance should also see interview 507-G for evidence of a particularly noteworthy shift. Let us open those both up. Addendum 507-00. Agent blank went missing on Expunged at the same time as SCP-507. A full-scale search was launched to find either of them, only for 507 to appear a week later. When questioned, it said that blank was holding onto its shoulder when it shifted, leading to both of them to appear in an alternate dimension where expunged. During the ensuing chaos, 507 lost contact with blank and could not relocate him before it shifted back to our standard reality. A new protocol has been in place in light of this. No one is to come in physical contact with 507 after 2 weeks following a displacement. Reevaluations of previous incidents has shown that there have always been at least 2 weeks between each, so this time frame will be the only safe time to touch 507 until further notice. Addendum 507-01. I don't care how much he grumbles about it, 507 is not to be cleared for challenging SCP-076-2 to 50 rounds of tic-tac-toe. Just no. Dr. Blank. Addendum 507-02. Fungus encountered by SCP-507 seems similar to that resulting from experimentation with 407. Forward. Below is an archive of all documented shifts undergone by 507. Each of these entries is presented with their contents in the following order: universal designation, retrieval, description, and requests. For ease of reference, an exhaustive list has been of equipment currently provisioned to 507 by chronological order. Tracking collar, holstered handgun that fires rubber bullets, kept loaded with the only provided magazine. Knife with sheath and belt, body mountable digital video camera. Tank of air, high intensity flashlight, 2 weeks of rations, water filtration kit, thermos, vegetarian MREs, waterproof set of binoculars, keychain sized Rubik's Cube. 1B7-55E-728. Retrieval, uneventful. Description: subject arrived in a desert environment and wandered around for roughly an hour before encountering another human. Said human was wearing a tanned leathered overcoat and was described as completely unshaved. The man was bewildered to have encountered the subject and demanded that the subject follow him to lead it back to food and shelter. Subject originally began to follow the man, but intentionally lost contact with him upon noticing that his leather coat featured no seams or stitching. Requests: none. 9E2-66V-7HG. Retrieval, uneventful. Sorry about that. Description: subject arrived in a forest habitat with no signs of previous or current industrialization. No further anomalies were perceptible until the subject grew hungry, at which point it discovered that harvesting or eating the plant life would cause them to emit telepathic screams. Subject abstained from eating for the first day as a result, but became hungry enough on the second day onward to consume the flora in spite of the screams. Testing has shown no biological changes in the subject from this, but subject repeatedly affirms that it felt horrible for doing so. Requests: none specifically, but subject adopted a gelatin and pudding based diet for 2.5 weeks after returning from this shift. J75-R63-3TF. Retrieval, uneventful. Description: subject arrived in a dimension with flipped genders. No notable differences besides this were discovered, although subject found issue with the fact that his female counterpart looks pretty much the same as the standard version. Requests: none. 000-000-000. Invalid. Retrieval via tracking device. Plainclothes agents found subject sitting in an alleyway at blank blank. Description: Subject was largely unresponsive upon retrieval and remained so until the standard questioning phase. When asked about where it went this shift, subject answered, "Nowhere. I think I missed it this time." Subject experienced minor motor skill impairment and decreased activity levels for roughly a month after the shift. Requests a wristwatch, which makes an audible tick as the second hand moves. Approved. J7Q-53Y-8ST. Retrieval. Subject was found in its corners, sprawled on the floor, attempting to chew through the sleeves of a straitjacket it was wearing. The jacket, leg restraints, and loss of motor skills still present from last shift led to the subject being unable to stand up or open the door to find assistance. Description. Subject shifted while sleeping and awoke restrained and lying in a hospital-grade bed. A nurse informed the subject that he was still a patient at the blank asylum and was currently suffering from advanced stages of dementia. Subject then was sedated and spent the rest of this shift alternating between semi-consciousness and total unconsciousness. Requests? None. 9E2-66V-7HG-2. Retrieval? Uneventful. Description? Subject once again arrived in the forest habitat of 9E2-66V-7HG. The flora seemed to have remembered the subject's last visit, though, and they reacted by screaming for the entire 4-day shift. Requests: a hug. Approved. 6K3-21B-IOS. Data expunged under the direct order of the O5 Council. Level 5 clearance required. That sounds pretty spooky, huh? Let's find a new spot and continue this story, huh? I know just a place to do that. Hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. Let's get some water and a little bit of food in us. Kind of sucks it only does 10, right? But that's it. You can definitely see why it's one of my favorite SCPs, though, right? Oh, you get to see the glowing, too. That's cool. My favorite I already read. The Here Were Dragons. That one's always sad, but I like the idea that they still remember you, even when they move on. Now, let's get some food. Let's move over to spawn, using my handy dandy Alt key. I think this will spawn. Oh, there's usually a little thing right here. Ah, there it is. The animation's a little sped up. Don't worry, guys. Like I said, this is still very work in progress. Don't worry about it. I wish I knew the command to fill up my hunger and thirst instantly, but I don't. Maybe I'll ask one of the devs after that. This is also the test map. This is not the complete map. So don't worry if you guys see jankiness or weirdness. You don't have to worry about that in the future. There's a pine forest map, a desert map, all these different things. I believe the pine forest is also going to come with seasons, so you'll see falling leaves and snow and all this different stuff. Which will be pretty cool to see. I would love a more Ice Age Mammoth Steppe-like environment where you have forests, and then to the north there's more whatchamacallit. Oh my gosh, the word's blanking on. More plains, grasslands environments. Let's just settle down right here and enjoy this view. Now, where was I? BN2-AL6-CTE. Retrieval, uneventful. Description. Subject arrived in a derelict metropolitan area. Subject was unable to locate any other humans, but noted an overabundance of cats in every area it visited. Said felines seemed no different from normal house cats, though, and the subject spent most of his shift petting any who came near. During the standard examination procedures after retrieval, trace amounts of Toxoplasma gondii variant were discovered on the subject's clothing, as well as larger amounts in its shoes. Further testing showed that the subject had not yet been infected with the toxoplasmosis variant, most likely attributed to the short time frame of the shift not allowing the subject to grow hungry and seek out food. All clothing and belongings that were on subject's person during the shift were incinerated, and the subject forced to undergo special decontamination procedures in order to prevent any possibility of contagion. Request a pair of rubber gloves. Denied, on the basis that hand protection would not have protected subject from infection in any way. 125-28P-OS4-3. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was attempting to return on its own, but was making less progress than usual due to the discomfort of doing so. Description. Subject once again arrived in a pitch black area with muted breathing nearby. Subject decided to seek an exit this time via blind wandering. Subject eventually found itself at the mouth of a corridor with what appeared to be a light source at the end. Subject began to run towards the light upon noticing this. As it grew closer, the light suddenly grew in intensity, and the subject was exposed to searing pain. Subject passed out at this point and only awoke after it had shifted back. Examination upon retrieval revealed that the subject's epidermis had been cleanly stripped down to the stratum granulosum. Granulusum. Anyway, in all areas open to sunlight, and down to the stratum lucidium. That one I do know. In all areas covered by clothing. Requests. None, but subject reappeared wearing a pair of large, heavily tinted sunglasses. Subject did not notice that it was wearing these until they were pointed out, and supposed that they were probably why its eyes did not undergo the same process as its skin. 7F2-WA3-193. Retrieval, uneventful. Description. Subject arrived in an urban area, with no major changes as far as it could tell. Subject used the public computers of a library to search for differences between this dimension and ours, eventually finding out that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by his vice president in order to claim his position. This ultimately led to the presidency becoming a tribe leader-like position, where the current holder, is legally allowed to be challenged and overthrown by other suitable candidates. Subject noted, with great surprise, that this change did not do much to alter most major presidents taking office. Many minor and or detrimental presidencies tended to end via bullet wounds, open in unlikely locales, or from improbable angles, which deterred most from attempting coups at all. I apologize. WS6-ECU-83D. Retrieval, uneventful. Description. Subject arrived at the mouth of a cave with intense heat. Subject walked outside the cave for further investigation to find that the area around it was a wasteland. Most of the heat appeared to be emanate from two suns in the sky. The subject could not discern whether they were extremely large or extremely close to the planet. Upon further examination, the suns blinked and turned away, and the heat subsided. Subject spent the rest of the shift within the cave. Requests, none. Q56-DRU-865. Retrieval. Subject found in the cafeteria, masticating on what appeared to be blank. Description. Upon containment of redacted. Subject uttered the words more, more, more before losing consciousness. Subject regained consciousness 2 hours later, expressing a strong desire for pudding. When questioned, subject claimed to see the biggest mound of pudding ever. When questioned as to why it was masticating on blank upon arrival, subject claimed to be eating a glob of pudding at the time. Subject reported seeing redacted rolling around the hallways. Hallucinations passed within 24 hours. Request, pudding. Request granted. F24-9S6-33C. Retrieval. Subject found in service tunnel 6R3BK without original equipment. Subject was wearing a simple uniform with a similar design to the current Foundation D-Class uniform. Description. Subject shifted while in dining area in the cafeteria. Destination dimension had an analog to the Foundation with a facility in the same location, although internal layout had significant differences. Security responded to subject as an intruder and detained it immediately. During this process, the subject was imprisoned and stripped of all equipment, including the tracking device. For the remainder of the shift, subject underwent repeated questioning. The Foundation analog refused to accept subject's explanation for dimension hopping. Information gleaned from post-shift debriefing indicates that F24-9S6-33C has a Foundation analog in the Society for Containment of the Paranormal. This analog has a strong British influence and is opposed by the Covert Occult Group and Church of the Mending God. Further details remain unclear, as the Society refused to answer the subject's questions and only slipped details by assuming it knew them already. Requests. Replacement equipment. Request granted. 4GT-F1Q-H17. Retrieval. Subject was found by the cafeteria kitchen staff of Site Blank, drenched, covered in mud, and suffering from severe hypothermia. Description. Subject arrived in a large field during a rainstorm. Subject attempted to find shelter from the rain, but found none, remaining in the rain for the entire shift. After an unknown length of time, the subject reported seeing entities in the distance. Although the heavy rain obscured the subject from obtaining detailed reports of their appearances, the subject described them as being vaguely humanoid in shape. The entities began to slowly move towards the subject from all directions. Near the end of the shift, the subject reported hearing labored breathing from the nearest entities. Request: a set of warm clothing. Approved. 2AW-9U2-E5T. Retrieval uneventful. Subject arrived in mid-ear, falling from an outdoor environment into a subterranean body of water at the bottom of a large cavern. Though admittedly experienced a strong surge of adrenaline from this event, subject reported swimming a long way before reaching land. Subsequent observation revealed a giant hole in the ceiling of the cavern, through which subject had apparently fallen. Also reported were archways to other large caverns, most of which shafts of sunlight visible, indicating other surface collapses. Regular vertical grooves in the walls indicated possible excavation, despite the cavern's immense size. No other sign of life was observed. Before returning, subject realized that the possibility of shifting back to our reality so far underground might cause it to be displaced in solid rock. It spent its remaining time frantically searching for a way back to the surface. The subject succeeded. It discovered that the sinkholes were much more widespread than what had been visible from below ground. Request diving lessons. Request denied. 2UU-5I9-Q3D. Retrieval via tracking device. Description: the length of time the subject was absent from our reality was notable, being roughly 3 months in length. However, during this time it made several notable discoveries, including several SCPs uncontained by our reality's SCP Foundation, but contained by Universe 2UU-5I9-Q3D's equivalent. These SCPs have now been contained. Through this 3-month time frame, the subject managed to become a member of the SCP Foundation equivalent, working its way up the ranks far faster than would have been anticipated, assuming it had been made a member of Foundation personnel on the same day. At the time of its return, he was apparently in the field, working to contain 2UU-5I9-Q3D's equivalent of SCP redacted. Curiously, our Foundation had sent out task force for precisely the same reason on the same day. Further links between Universe 2UU-5I9-Q3D and our reality are being investigated. Request to be made a member of Site personnel. Request denied. 3JT-3MD-DIG. Retrieval. Subject retrieved via implanted tracker. Medevac required to Site redacted. Description: subject was immobile upon retrieval due to greatly increased body mass, measured at redacted kilograms. Lead researcher redacted. Approved emergency use of SCP-394 to keep it alive in order to obtain a report. Upon recovery, subject reported being surrounded by really big creatures resembling redacted. They quickly trapped him in a transparent container. It was then transported an unknown distance to a shiny surface, whereupon the creatures began to observe him. After approximately 1 day, tubes were inserted into data expunged, unknown fluid which was not found upon examination. Subject reported that the tubes were removed shortly before the shift, and it observed redacted approaching, presumably for the purpose of extraction. Requests: services of personal trainer Dr. Blank has agreed to let the subject borrow her workout tapes. Subject now displays a strong aversion to pudding. 9J3-Y6X-GTY. Retrieval. The subject was found hanging from its ankles in a tree on site. Subject was partially encased in insulated reflective titanium armor upon retrieval. Description: the subject described the world it had arrived in as extra shiny. It stated that it was apprehended by law enforcement officers upon arrival. After being apprehended, the subject was transported to a nearby manufacturing facility and placed upside down on an assembly line where a series of metal sheets were shaped and cut to fit its body. It briefly had time to ask for clarification and was informed that the radiation from the sun was extremely dangerous and titanium reflective suits were required by law to prevent thermal radiation damage to any person or structure. Request: sunscreen and an eye exam. Granted. 52J-079-3GH. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was found inside a padlocked metal shed behind an abandoned house on the outskirts of blank. Description: subject arrived in a small room housing several dried corpses. Besides said corpses, the room was mostly bare. The only things subject noted were a single panelless window and a light fixture on the ceiling, which occasionally flickered. Subject attempted to rise to his feet, but had difficulty doing so due to repeated and unpredictable surges of motion. Subject eventually made its way to the window, at which point it discovered that its room was actually a container suspended in midair by a large chain. Subject watched as similar containers passed by him, and as it passed by others via a complex web of rails above it, which the chains were attached to. Subject could see nothing besides this but darkness in all directions. Subject then tried to wait out its time in this dimension by falling asleep, but found it difficult due to a newly discovered quality of the corpses. During moments of darkness caused by flickering, the corpses rearranged themselves into poses, which would be logical for living people during that particular moment. Sorry about that. If the subject were looking out the window, the corpses would be crowded around him in an attempt to get a better view. If the subject was sitting, they would also be seated in a pattern to form a full circle. If the subject attempted to reach the light fixture, they would act as a support / seem to be in the process of pushing him upwards, etc. Requests? None. YTF-5 and 2-Q00. Retrieval? Uneventful. Description. Subject arrived in a crowded casino-like area. Subject noted that the only type of machine available was something similar to slots, but they apparently required no money to play and gave out nothing upon a win. Upon actually sitting down in front of one and trying it, the subject discovered that the machine dispensed a small slip of paper with writing on it upon every pull of the lever and spin of the symbols it displayed. Subject could discern no real pattern to what symbol would produce what type of note, but wrote down a list of its attempts and what it received from each, just in case. Requests? None. FN3-05P-KHC. Sorry, just taking a quick look around, looking at the water and food. We're okay. Retrieval? Uneventful. Description. Subject appeared in a white corridor with steel doors lining both walls. Each door had a keypad, a small speaker system, and a clipboard containing forms written in undecipherable characters. As the subject approached one door to examine said clipboard, the door's attached speaker turned on and began to address it. Subject was informed that the voice belonged to the person locked behind that specific door, that he was wrongfully imprisoned, then left to die. The prisoner pleaded with the subject to release him from the cell. Subject jokingly replied that he would free the prisoner if he promised not to stab the subject upon release. There was roughly a 7-second pause before the prisoner asked what stabbing was. After a moment of deliberation, the subject defined stabbing as putting a hole in someone using a sharp object. Another pause followed. The prisoner eventually affirmed that he would not stab subject because all of his objects were very blunt. Subject did not open that door or any of the others. Requests? None. That's a good idea. Don't open that door. I-52-37G-Z8M. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was in a holding cell of the blank police station under charges of public indecency. Extraction was successfully made with no complications. Description. Subject arrived in an area apparently undergoing a large snowstorm. Subject attempted to find shelter but could not find its way in the storm, and had almost succumbed to exposure by the time it was located and pulled into a cave by a man covered in protective furs. The man helped the subject out of its wet clothing, although he did not have an extra set of garments. He led the subject to an underground hot spring his cave was connected to. When the man was sure that the subject was regaining his strength, he removed his furs and entered the springs as well. Subject was extremely surprised to discover that the man was a second SCP-507. Subject noted no obvious physical differences between itself and the double, although the alternate 507 had a pattern of tribal scarring across his torso, as well as at the bases of some of his limbs. Subject and the double remained in the cave and conversed with each other until subject shift ended. Request. Subject drew a replica of alternate 507 scars from memory, and asked for any information on possible cultural or symbolic meaning behind the patterns. None have been found so far. 543-51U-P09. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject recovered in a cornfield in redacted, with unidentified brown liquid splattered on his cheek. A human heart with the words "I need you" written in the same liquid was discovered in subject's hand. Subject claimed that said object was not in its possession during the shift and does not know how it came into its possession. Researchers are trying to identify the liquid. Description: subject arrived in pitch black darkness with the sound of crying nearby. Upon activating his flashlight, subject discovered the smiling man from previous shifts leaning towards him. Brown liquid leaked from around his sunglasses. Smiling man pushed its face closer to subject's and uttered the phrase, "Why did you do this?" Smiling man then wiped off a portion of the brown liquid from its eyes with its hand, began caressing subject's cheek with it. Subject forcefully pushed Smiling Man away. Subject observed that the Smiling Man's business suit contained several holes, with brown liquid trailing down from them. Subject drew its firearm and pulled the trigger. However, for unknown reasons, the pistol did not fire. Smiling Man began slowly walking towards Subject. Subject ran for approximately 10 minutes and spent the rest of the shift huddled in a corner. Requests a more reliable pistol. Denied, as the cause of the error is unknown. Sorry guys, my throat hurts a little bit. Don't worry, we're going to be taking a drink of water. Sorry about that, guys. We'll continue. Right. 9E2-66V-7HG5-3. Retrieval via tracking device. Subject was discovered 7 kilometers, or 4.3 miles, northeast of the facility. Description: subject shifted while reading in its quarters. Subject found itself returned to the forest habitat containing telepathic trees. The trees remained silent upon its entry to the environment. The subject admitted that despite its previous experiences within the environment, it was curious about the absence of any human habitation. The subject propelled itself to the highest ground it could find in order to see over the tree canopy. The subject found a clearing on top of a hill. Subject reported seeing a huge semi-translucent blue dome covering the entire forest. The tree canopy extended out to the edge of the dome, with the foliage so thick that looking up and through it was unfeasible. The subject reported itself to see the dome slightly off-center, suggesting it was not underneath the direct middle. Requests? None. 5Z4-75T-7YB. Retrieval. Subject was found prone and unresponsive in its quarters. Subject was bleeding significantly. Several deep gashes were discovered on the left side of the subject, just under the armpit. The claw marks extended to the bottom of the ribcage. Subject received traditional first aid and was committed to the on-site infirmary. Description: the subject woke up on a snow-covered plain. Subject did not have its backpack on hand at the time of the shift, having been asleep. All that went with it was its bedsheets and pajamas. Subject reported having seen a TV show of how to survive in the cold environment before the shift. It attempted to build a crude snow cave using its hands when it was interrupted by a large white bear. This is the extent of its recollection. Requests: a proper weapon. Granted. Losing subject to non-anomalous polar bear would be a waste of Foundation resources and an embarrassment. Subject shall receive a knife, sheath, and belt, and is required to keep these items on its person at all times. (3G8-14H-9UX) Retrieval. Recontained in the kitchen, missing left hand and using expletives in an uncontrolled fashion. Subject was returned to the infirmary. Description: the subject transitioned into a dimension very similar to our own at first glance. The subject was apprehended by Foundation personnel in the infirmary and questioned about his small canines. The subject admitted to not knowing what that meant, but quickly worked it out after his interviewer opened its mouth and pointed to a set of large fangs located either side of its incisors. The interviewer also commented the subject's rounded body shape, which considered unusual and fascinating in this dimension. Despite these differences, the subject described the creatures who interviewed it as kind. They proceeded to bring the subject a large amount of food. The subject noted its distinct lack of anything green in its meal offered to him. When later told to elaborate by Foundation personnel, he stated it was all meat. After eating the meal, two of the creatures contained the subject in their equivalent of an infirmary, escorted him into a small room nearby containing a locket hanging on the opposite wall. They all told the subject to remove its clothes and stand in front of the locket. After the subject had done as ordered, they opened the locket and exposed it to a green orb for approximately 8 minutes. The subject noted the lack of any scar tissue on his left side and a strong feeling of general well-being. The next day, a creature came to him and asked for a small portion of his skin and musculature in order to study genetic differences. To this, the subject responded with, "Only if you provide me with another delicious meal." The creature was visibly excited by this outcome. A small biopsy was conducted on the subject's upper right thigh. The subject described this experience as painful, but totally worth it. A huge amount of unspecified meat was delivered to the subject upon completion of this biopsy. The subject was then released to explore the facility. For the next month and a half, the creatures continued to supply the subject with mounds of meat and engage it in amiable conversation. The subject acquired 14 kilograms or 30.8 pounds of fat during this time. On 16/4/2015, the subject was escorted to the kitchen equivalent. It was then put on a chopping block and its left hand was removed. Requests a replacement hand granted. 8A8-91D1T-710. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject arrived in a large opaque dome filled with plants without any signs of human habitation. The subject stated that walking was difficult and uncomfortable. Upon further investigation, the subject found a window displaying what was described as pitch black with Earth on the horizon. Several minutes later, a tall humanoid encountered the subject, inquiring about his comparatively short stature. The subject replied, asking where he was. The human stated they were in Base 12, Oxygen and Vegetable Wing. Subject asked what Earth was doing in the sky. Humanoid appeared puzzled and responded, "That is the moon," gesturing to Earth. A short argument ensued, and the humanoid departed. Subject noted that after the Earth set, a rocky gray landscape became visible, becoming identifiable as the lunar surface after an hour or so. One subject attempted to explore more of his surroundings, but shifted back to our reality shortly after setting out. Requests on camera denied. 7JO-175-35X. Retrieval uneventful. Description: subject shifted while attempting to fall asleep. Subject arrived in a large body of fresh water. Subject swam upward an estimated 35 meters before reaching the surface of the water and beginning to tread. Subject noted several dark shapes moving in the water beneath it and bright lights in the distance, but did not attempt to approach either. Subject reportedly found breathing extremely difficult. Subsequent physical tests indicated that the subject had ingested substantial amounts of methane during the shift. Requests a tank of breathing gas as part of its equipment. Approved. 99P-UT1-24J. Retrieval. Subject was found in the location in which it had left, curled up and crying violently. Subject screamed, "Why did I have to go?" when an attempt was made to interact with it, and suffered from severe depression for several days thereafter. Agents described a beautiful smell coming from it. Description: subject landed in a place that it could only describe as impossibly beautiful. Subject stated that it was like the best parts of every place all put together, and that the beauty was so overwhelming that subject had no desire to move. When it became when it began to become thirsty and hungry, science appeared extended vines and shot a liquid into its mouth, which it described as the best anything I have ever drunk ever. Sweet and rich and everything all at once. After roughly one day, subject, having never looked at his watch during this time, had no clear knowledge of the duration. A humanoid female close to subject's age unexpectedly encountered subject as she walked over the hill. Subject claimed that they had a long conversation, despite not speaking the same language, and was unable to explain how this was possible or the form their communication had taken. Subject claimed that he understood her answers to his questions about her and their location, but was unable to articulate them. Subject described her with, "I know I'm sounding repetitive here, but she was the most amazing person I've ever met." With some reluctance, subject stated that they had been about to kiss when the shift ended. Subject then had to be prevented from committing suicide. Tests after successful See, this is what I mean. Psychiatric treatment indicated subject was considerably far more physically fit and had gained roughly 8 IQ points, despite having done no significant exercise during the shift. Requests: various foods, beverages, and pictures of women widely regarded as very physically attractive. The subject considered all granted subjects unsatisfactory, making statements such as, "It's not the same," and "No, not like that." Subject then requested a way to stay in universe permanently after having arrived there, and was reminded that it was impossible. A5-93W-132. Retrieval. Subject returned malnourished and suffering from effects of unknown toxic substance, from which it soon recovered. Later analysis showed that the substance to be a venom containing a high level of silicon. A small silicon-based crystalline creature was hanging from the subject's finger when the subject returned. The specimen subsequently died of unknown causes, possibly starvation. Description: Subject shifted to a dimension which primarily contained crystals of varying sizes and hues. The sun was described by the subject as smaller and bluer than ours. The ground was covered in sand and also of various dull colors. The subject noted that many of the large crystals were moving slowly and appeared to be alive. It also saw smaller creatures which scuttled around quite rapidly and seemed to be composed of crystal. The subject spent some time searching for water, which it found. It noted that there seemed to be considerably more of the smaller crystalline animals near the water. Shortly before the subject returned, it was attacked by one of the small creatures. The subject describes both the larger and smaller creatures as both looking and behaving similarly to crustaceans. Requests: food and water that doesn't taste like sand. Granted. T34-DE2-04F. Retrieval. Subject was found in sector blank, a highly restrictive area. Subject was swiftly removed. Description: subject shifted to a dimension with a world covered in salt water. Subject then equipped its scuba gear and decided to see what was below the water. Subject descended for approximately 3 minutes and believed it had traveled 50 meters down before seeing the ocean floor. The floor was covered with abandoned buildings and rubble, corroded and covered with aqueous plant life. Several skeletons could be seen. Subject had searched the underwater city for 3 minutes when he spotted 3 black fish-like creatures moving towards it. Subject drew his knife and firearm before shifting back into our dimension. Requests: a pair of waterproof binoculars. Approved. CZE-582-7DG. Retrieval: uneventful. Description: subject appeared in the bedroom of a suburban home and was greeted by several people of varying age and race. They welcomed him to their home and showed him around the building. Subject noted an abundance of windows in the building. Upon looking outside, subject noticed that the house was encased in a large glass dome and was being viewed by several cameras, and the residents explained that they were part of a zoo-like enclosure. Requests? None. And I think we're going to stop it right there. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Even if you didn't, that's perfectly fine. The next video will be a continuation of this one. So, Ginger, I hope you like this longer form of content. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Even if you didn't, it's perfectly fine. We all have our different opinions and everything. And I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Sorry guys, I'm trying to get the outro music to work. I guess we're not gonna have it happen today. That's okay though. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.